Hey, welcome everybody to the 40 Finance channel. Today I'm going to be digging into Square stock after their recent earnings report. Try to get into the details a little bit to see where is Square making their money during this difficult time for small business, and is it a good thing or a bad thing for long-term investors who have picked up the stock. We'll also take a look at Square's valuation today and talk about whether it's a buy, sell, hold over the next 1 to 3 years. Always important to call out that my stock picks and projections are my opinion for your entertainment only. Please talk to a financial professional before taking on the risks of the stock market. Beyond that though, if you do enjoy stock market analysis and going deep on stocks like Square and other personal finance topics, then please subscribe to the 40 Finance channel. Thank you to everybody who's supported the channel so far. Okay, so if you haven't seen the headlines after Square's most recent earnings report, most analysts were happy with the numbers that came in. There was a lot of beats versus estimates going on. And so the general mood for Square investors after that earnings report is positive. After all, they did bring in more money than was anticipated. However, you see from the headline over here that a lot of that money that beat the top line was from their Bitcoin business. And certainly money's money at the end of the day, but you have to ask the question of why did you invest in Square? Why would you invest in Square? And was Bitcoin one of the factors that you purchased Square for? Okay, let's kick things off by looking at stock price today at $154. You got a 52-week range on Square at $32 to $158. So definitely riding at the high point of that 52-week range. You see on the chart off to the right, prior to the pandemic, we were riding at about $70 or $80. Then into the March lows. And ever since then, during this lockdown period and into the reopening, Square has been absolutely on fire, going from a low in the 30s all the way up to today's price of $154. Current PE ratio there in yellow is 224. You look at the metrics at the top, and that forward PE does go up a little bit to 277. Trailing 12 months revenue, $5.8 billion. Cash on hand of $2.6 billion. Debt load of $2.2 billion. So pretty good spot there in terms of debt. As I always say, you've got enough cash and enough revenue to service those debt levels, in my opinion, fairly effectively. Okay, so now let's take a look at the historical valuations for Square stock across the past several quarters. This kind of gives us an idea of how is the price today, price versus valuation today, compared to the other buying opportunities we've had in Square over the past year or two. And you look at the yellow columns that are highlighted there, starting from left to right. Trailing PE in the current quarter is 222, and looking back, Square has only been profitable on a trailing PE basis for the past couple quarters, and you can see that that price to earnings ratio has went up substantially since they first posted a PE back at the end of March. Forward PE, very similar story in the sense that it has went up in tandem. So effectively the price of Square's earnings is costing the average investor more for today's purchase price. Looking at the bottom on price to sales and price to book, very similar story here. Both of them are at near all-time highs. All right, so the stock's run up a little bit, certainly on a valuation score. But what do the analysts see going forward for the stock price of Square? To get a feel for this, I use TipRanks, which does a really good job of charting analysts based on their performance. I'm a paid subscriber. Please check out the affiliate link below if you're interested in checking out the service and potentially supporting the channel. So when looking at these analysts, we try to cut the noise down and just focus on the best performing analysts based on TipRank's scoring system. So you see off to the left, we've got nothing but 5-star folks here. And then far, far off to the right, you can see that we're also focused on opinions that have come out since the earnings report. So everybody's today or yesterday. Just make sure we have the freshest analyst looks at this company. In the middle on the highlighted yellow column, analyst rating across the board for these folks is a buy across the board. You have price targets ranging from 200, looks like the low is 165. And those are projections over the next 12 months. So you'd be riding into summer of 2021 on these price targets. The upside, most of the analysts agree that there's another, let's call it 10 to 25% left to run in Square over the next 12 months or so. Generally speaking then, if you're in Square for the long term, it does appear that there's a couple more bucks to be made, at least based on the opinion of the analysts here. All right, so I mentioned in the beginning of the video about the Bitcoin revenue that came in this quarter for Square. And again, money's money, you're running a business, your job is to make money. Square certainly did that here, absolutely no questions asked. What I want to do though is get into a little bit of detail on how they made their money and what income streams paid off, because I think that a lot of the common investors on the street look at Square, they immediately think of Cash App, and they immediately think of their merchant payment processing that you see in a lot of small to medium-sized businesses. So if you've ever been to a festival or an event and somebody uses that card swiper that they put on top of their phone, that was likely a Square device. Or if you've been in a small to medium business where they have almost like an iPad type thing that sits on the cashier's table and they kind of flip it around and you can sign with your finger, that is likely a Square platform as well. So that's where Square was rooted, getting small to medium-sized businesses set up with solid hardware, payment processing, digital processing, not to mention all the reports that go into the software behind the scenes. So that's where the company started, and that was sort of their mission statement. And since then, we've evolved a little bit into the Cash App. So if you're very familiar with Venmo, and I talked about PayPal last week, Cash App is basically a rival to Venmo, and it's a peer-to-peer funding platform so that you can send money to and from supposedly friends only for free. The Cash App has experienced record growth, and it continues to be a fierce competitor for Venmo. So Square sort of added that to its revenue stream, and it's come at a good time because obviously small to medium-sized businesses are struggling right now, but we'll see that the Cash App has actually done pretty well. Now, in a much less discussed category for Square, you have this sort of Bitcoin marketplace where Square, through the Cash App, gives you the opportunity to purchase and invest in Bitcoin. Think of it as sort of like a Robin Hood for Bitcoin, if you will, except that you can hold it in your wallet, which is a big advantage, your digital wallet, with the Cash App. And one of the things that has spiked here recently in the pandemic, obviously you have a lot of younger people who have jumped into investing. We've all seen the Robin Hood stories, but they're also jumping into this sort of Bitcoin investing as well. And so the call out for me, and a reason to potentially be concerned, depending on what you got into Square for, is that this Bitcoin is becoming a bigger slice of the pie, and depending on your thoughts on the future of Bitcoin, it could put Square on some shaky ground if Bitcoin were to drop or the activity across this sort of pseudo investment platform were to fail for some reason. Let's jump in and take a look at the revenue numbers directly from Square's investor report here. Just for the sake of a broader view, I've highlighted the 6-month period off to the right. Technically, the quarter was the 3 months ended that you see off to the left, but 6 months, in my opinion, gives us a better look at the business as a whole over these difficult times we've been seeing. All right, highlighted in the green box there is transaction-based revenue and subscription and service-based revenue. So in this area, you are going to have more of the core Square offerings that most people would sort of associate Square stock with. And you can see that despite the difficulties that we're facing in the world from a health standpoint, and they've at least grown their revenue from the same period in 2019. Granted, the whole thing together is only $170K over the year before. So I would say minor growth, but certainly better than what could be a catastrophic scenario with the state of small to medium businesses in America today. I would say that comping and growing a little bit, they've done a fantastic job. Looking ahead to the blue box, this is where the Bitcoin revenue comes in. And you can see a substantial beat to last year. Bitcoin this year for Square made $1.18 million versus $190,000 last year. So that's a plus 1 million beat, and we're only 6 months through the year. Compare that with total net revenue in the brown line, which came in at 1.2 million over 2019, and basically Bitcoin, was upwards of 85% of what Square has made their comps on this year. Scrolling down to the bottom, you see that orange box, which kind of tabulates net loss per share. They do the basic and the diluted. There doesn't appear to be much difference. And for the 6 months that have ended in June of 2020, Square has lost 27 cents a share compared to losing only 11 cents last year. So the losses are compounding. Granted, the losses are compounding for a lot of people in this environment, but it is important to note that they lost more per share on this year than they did last year, despite all the advancements with Cash App, their hardware, PPP loans that they were processing. So a little bit of a red flag for me. All right, speaking of Cash App, that's certainly been a win for Square to put that out. Let's take a look at Cash App performance directly from the investors report. And you can see that right off the bat, the first line under the bolded headline, Cash App delivered strong growth in the second quarter, generating 1.2 billion of revenue and 281 million in gross profits. Now, where it gets interesting is the next highlighted line, excluding Bitcoin. Cash App revenue was 325 million, up 140% year over year. So 140% year over year is great and exactly what we expect out of a company like Square. Taking out the $1 million+ in Bitcoin, though, really changes the look of that comp. Looking off to the top right in the yellow line there, you have Cash App engagement also benefited from disbursement of the CARES Act stimulus. So this, of course, was the government stimulus program that sent everybody checks to deal with the sort of COVID pandemic. And down at the bottom, you see we believe this uplift was partly driven by the government stimulus program. This is referring to the peer-to-peer payments, instant deposit, cash card, Bitcoin investing, and stock brokerage accounts. Some of the increases that they saw in things like peer-to-peer, deposit, cash card, and investing in brokerage was a direct result of sort of the free money, so to speak, that was put into Cash App accounts from the government. And finally, at the bottom, Cash App generated 54 million of transaction-based revenue during the second quarter of 2020. But on the red line, something that's interesting, growth was driven primarily by an increase in business accounts using Cash App. All right, so one of the things we have to be careful of with businesses using Cash App is that's a sort of an avoidance of fees, right? So if you're processing through the standard Square hardware that we talked about, the phone swipes and all those things, there would be transaction fees involved, which would, of course, pay Square at the bottom line. So businesses skirting the guidelines a little bit and using the Cash App to pay and exchange funds with customers, that's great for those two people, those two parties, if you will, but it's not technically the way that Square needs things to work to make money. And then noted earlier, there is some concern with the PPP programs and the stimulus programs being the catalyst behind Cash App's success. So as far as account activity, direct deposits, obviously when the government gives out free money, every platform is going to see a boost. But the concern in me lies what happens when these things go away, and then what happens to Cash App and this Bitcoin investing arm that has suddenly spun up when the money's not free anymore. All right, so the bottom line here on should Square investors be nervous or worried about this most recent quarterly report, my answer is their ears should at least perk up, right? At the end of the day, Bitcoin transactions bailed out the standard transactions in a very big way. And again, money's money, Square made the money, I get it. You throw in the government stimulus program and what that appears to have done for the Cash App, and I'm nervous on what the future holds. On the bright side of Cash App, they are definitely adding new users. They are a legitimate competitor to Venmo. That Bitcoin brokerage arm in there, though, really clouds the true performance of what Cash App is doing for the bottom line. Best you can do right now if you're an investor is just make sure that the user base continues to grow. I like that they're monetizing it in a different way. It just makes it really hard to get in there and figure out who's using Cash App and in what way are they using it. That needs to be clarified at some point. Number 3 on the board, merchant hardware business. No surprise, that's going to be very tough until there's a vaccine and the world gets back to normal. Certainly I would expect that the quarter we're in now will be much better for small businesses, but it is going to be a rough road, likely until summer of next year. Bottom line for me, there's a ton of questions surrounding Square. The money came in. How that money came in to me is a little bit of a mixed bag, and it doesn't do a lot for me to think that Square's growing at an X amount of clip, because some of this money, frankly, came in from some funny ways. So if I'm an investor with Square, I would hold now because I think the future is bright over the long term. But from a buy perspective, I wouldn't really touch the stock until it got under $125 or we see some sort of significant rebound from the core business we thought we were investing in with Square. All right, guys, so that's my take on Square stock. Let me know in the comments what you think, and please give me a like and subscribe if you can. We'll see you on the next video.